At the beginning of the story, we see a town named Chester's Mill. At first, it was just like other ordinary towns. But then, such horrible, terrifying incidents started happening there that the entire town became worse than hell. But just what kind of dangerous incidents started happening there? Let's dive in. So, the story begins by showing a guy named Barbie who was burying a dead body in the woods. Barbie was not a local resident of that place, and from the injury on Barbie's forehead, it seemed that he must have had a pretty big fight with the dead guy. After burying that man, Barbie starts to leave town in his car, but right then, he encounters the car of a police officer named Sheriff. Seeing him, he gets a little scared, which causes his attention to be diverted from driving, but somehow he manages to get away from the police. But right then, some cows were standing smack dab in the middle of the road. To save them, Barbie turns his car sharply, causing it to end up in a field full of cows. Because of this, he got a little injured. A few seconds later, the ground there started shaking violently due to an earthquake, when suddenly, a thing from the sky comes down in front of Barbie and falls down, and everything becomes quiet. Barbie saw that the cow was cut into 2 pieces by that thing that fell from the sky. He, being scared, starts to touch that thing, and he finds out that it is an invisible wall that was so sharp that because of it, many houses were also cut into 2 parts. Right then, a guy named Joe comes and asks him, "Are you okay or not?" He also, upon seeing that invisible wall, is shocked. On the other side, Sheriff and Linda get the news that the entire town's power supply has been cut. The phone lines are down, and the internet is also not working. Even all the satellite connections had stopped working. Right then, a plane flying over the town collides with that invisible wall and crashes, which, upon seeing, people became even more panicked, and it becomes confirmed that this is not just an invisible wall, but a round-shaped dome, meaning a dome that has covered half the town. Meanwhile, on the other side, we see Phil and his assistant Duty at the radio station, who were trying to get a signal. The 2 of them were a little confused about why the signal suddenly went out. Here, Phil thinks that this is a good opportunity to boost their radio ratings, so the 2 of them get busy fixing the signal. Meanwhile, a fire truck was coming from the other side of the dome, upon seeing which Barbie, signaling to the truck driver towards this invisible wall, stops him and saves him from crashing. A little later, some cops come there to investigate, but understanding this invisible dome was not within their capability. At the same time, a town councilman named Big Jim also arrives, but he too doesn't understand anything about this dome. Here, the police get information that all the roads leading towards that town have been closed because, due to that dome, a lot of accidents are happening. A little distance from it, at home, a guy named Junior was getting intimate with a girl named Angie. Angie was a nurse by profession and was also Joe's older sister. After being intimate, Junior says to Angie, "I love you very much," but she tells him that she doesn't feel anything like that for him. Because of this, Junior's heart is broken, and the 2 of them start to argue. Here, their argument escalates so much that Angie slaps him and leaves from there. After this, we see a family of 3 people, in which Mother Caroline, Alice, and their daughter Nuri were heading towards that town. They did not know the news that the dome had covered that town. On the other side, we see an investigative reporter named Julia, who was very famous in Chester's Mill town. One day, a woman calls her to give her a secret piece of news. That woman tells her that she saw 6 trucks filled with propane going into Chester's Mill that week, and according to her, such a large quantity of fuel like propane coming into the town could be part of some dangerous plan. Julia promises that woman to investigate this matter, but she, being too busy with her work, couldn't pay attention to it. Meanwhile, Big Jim goes to the radio station and makes an emergency announcement. Caroline, who was coming to town with Alice and Nuri, hears this announcement, but they think that it is some kind of advertisement. Therefore, she doesn't pay attention to this announcement, and their car barely avoids hitting the dome because, ahead of them, a truck coming from the other side had already hit the dome and crashed, which, upon seeing, she immediately applies her car's brakes. Seeing such a big incident, Nuri starts having seizures, causing her to faint, but before fainting, she says something about a pink star. Now from here, Nuri is quickly taken to the hospital, which was filled with people injured from the events happening in the town. Meanwhile, Julia and Barbie were also bringing injured people to the hospital. In this same hospital, Julia's husband was also a doctor. She goes to meet him, but at that time, her husband was not in the hospital. In the hospital, Julia finds out that her husband never worked on Sundays, but he had always been lying to Julia. Outside the hospital, we see Barbie and Angie meeting. Seeing the 2 of them together, a different kind of jealousy is born inside Junior. Meanwhile, the town's borders are sealed by soldiers. Many scientists and experts also could not figure out any reason reason for this strange problem. But a few hours later, Big Jim meets Sheriff to talk about the propane. Here, from their conversation, we find out that they knew a little bit about this dome beforehand, but they were not talking about it openly. Meanwhile, Barbie had to stay in that town for one day, and he had no place to stay. Therefore, he decides to spend the night in his car itself. Right then, Junior comes to him and tells him to stay away from Angie. Slowly, his talk turns into a threat. Barbie is surprised about what his mistake even is. In the meantime, Julia arrives there, which causes them to stop fighting. From here, the scene shifts, and we see that, being careless about the town's situation, in one place, some teenagers were partying. Joe was also among them. Joe starts talking to a guy about the situation there, but suddenly Joe starts having a seizure and starts talking about a pink star, just like Nuri had spoken about before. Meanwhile, Joe's sister Angie is home alone when suddenly Junior breaks into her house, kidnaps her, and takes her to his father's broken-down shelter. Here, he tells her that, "I know about this dome that has covered the town." Here, Angie also finds out from him that Big Jim is Junior's father. Junior also tells Angie that his father was always worried about his family's security, which is why he had built a shelter for the family. Meanwhile, on the other side, Julia brings Barbie to stay at her house. Right then, suddenly Barbie's gaze falls on her husband's photo, and he realizes that this is the same man whom he had killed in the morning. On the other side, Linda and Sheriff were monitoring all vehicles so that no one would accidentally hit this dome. Right then, suddenly Sheriff has an attack, and he dies right there. Now from here, we are shown the morning's events in a flashback, where Barbie had come to town to meet Julia's husband, who was a doctor. He talks to him about some payment, but the doctor refuses to give him the payment, which causes a fight between the two of them, and accidentally, Barbie shoots him. Barbie knew that even though he had killed him by mistake, he would be punished for it, and to avoid this, he buried his body in the woods. Meanwhile, in the present, waking up in the morning, Barbie sees that the chain from his neck is missing, so he asks Julia about it. Julia tells him that she will find his chain and give it to him, and right then, Barbie remembers that the chain had fallen in the cabin itself where he had killed her husband. Over there, Joe was with his friend Ben, who had helped him during his seizure the previous night. Ben asks him about this pink star that he had mentioned during the seizure at night, but Joe couldn't remember anything about it. Meanwhile, in the radio station, Duty, with the help of a special device, becomes successful in contacting people outside the dome. She could hear the soldiers talking among themselves, but she doesn't say anything to them. There, the soldiers were also confused about what this invisible wall finally was. On the other side, Big Jim is sitting in a restaurant, eating breakfast, when Linda arrives there and tells him the news of Sheriff's death, which causes them to immediately go to the guy who buries dead bodies, whose name was Lester. Over there, Angie, in the shelter, tries her hardest to call someone for help, but she is not successful. Right then, Junior comes there and ties her to the bed with a chain. Meanwhile, Big Jim brings Lester with him, who was Sheriff's friend. He becomes very sad and troubled by Sheriff's death. When Linda is not around them, he and Big Jim talk about last month's propane import, that all three of them had a hand in the propane import, and they had hidden this fact from the townspeople. Sheriff's death confirmed that he wouldn't be able to tell anyone about their involvement, which was also good news for them. Later that day, when Linda comes to the police station, she sees that Big Jim is searching for something in Sheriff's office. When Linda asks, Jim tells her that he is looking for Sheriff's will papers there, but actually, he had come there to find the papers related to the propane import, which could get him and Lester into trouble. He immediately comes out and tells Lester, "I think those papers will be in Sheriff's house," and to get them, he immediately sends Lester to his house. In the meantime, Julia quickly goes to duty at the radio station, where she sees that they can listen to the conversations of the soldiers standing outside the dome through the device. Listening to them, Julia finds out that they are trying to dig the ground to remove the dome, but they are not succeeding in this task. After this, Julia spreads the news throughout the entire town via the radio, which causes fear to arise in people, and people panic. Scientists test what effect water has on the dome, but they find Joe sees that this dome is like a sieve. He tells Ben that a very minimal amount of water can pass through this dome. On the other hand, Barbie goes to Julia's husband, the doctor's cabin, to look for his chain. He finds his chain from there, but right then, Junior arrives there and sees him. Junior asks him, "Did you sleep with Angie?" Here, Barbie thinks that maybe he saw him looking for the chain, and that's why he couldn't just let Junior leave from there like that. Therefore, he starts beating Junior very badly. Meanwhile, we see that Lester, reaching Sheriff's house, starts looking for the propane import papers. After some time, he finds those papers in a drawer. Right then, he burns them. When he is about to leave from there, his foot knocks over the burning papers, and the fire from the papers catches the house's curtains, causing the flames to spread throughout the entire house, and the whole house starts burning. Seeing this, very quickly, many people gather and try to put out the fire, but without a fire truck, putting out the fire was impossible. If they let the house burn, the temperature inside the dome would have increased a lot, which could have cost people their lives. Therefore, everyone gets busy putting out the fire together. Barbie leads the people in putting out the fire. Right then, Linda hears Lester's screaming voices from inside the house. She goes inside and drags him out and sends him to the doctor for treatment. Here, even after 1 hour, people do not achieve success in putting out the fire. Instead, the fire flares up even more. Finally, Jim brings a loader and knocks the house down, and only then does the fire calm down. After this, all the tired people gather. Among them, a policeman named Paul, being frustrated, says that we all will never be able to get out of this dome because this dome is not letting the smoke from the fire get out. He says that we are all going to die inside this dome. Saying this, he fires a bullet into the air, which, hitting the dome, hits another policeman, and he immediately dies. Here, Paul is arrested. When it gets dark, Joe and his friends go skating. Right then, Nuri comes to Joe and tells him that she needs to charge her phone, which he takes to his house because his house had a generator, which was in only a few select houses in that town. Over there, Linda brings Paul to jail. There, some people were protesting outside the police station. Actually, those people were protesting against the police's lousy system. Jim calms them all down by saying that help will be provided to them when needed. After being locked up in the lockup, Paul has a heart attack, which causes Linda to run inside to help him. But then she finds out that Paul was just acting like he was having an attack. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Paul pushes her, locks her in the lockup, and runs away from there. Meanwhile, in the shelter, Junior goes to Angie again. Angie had understood that if she wanted to get out of there, she would have to trap Junior in a web of lies. This is why she shares childhood memories with him from when they both used to go into a closed tunnel, and says that maybe the dome didn't affect the tunnel, so they could get out. Here, Angie thinks that now he is trapped in her love's web, so maybe he will let her go. But nothing like that happens. Junior makes a plan to go into that tunnel alone. Meanwhile, when Jim comes to the police station, he sees Linda locked up in the lockup instead of Paul. He immediately gets her out of the lockup. They find out that Paul has taken a rifle and some bullets with him. Linda immediately sets out towards the woods in search of him because she knew that Paul often went to the woods for hunting. Meanwhile, Jim prepares a team to catch Paul. Over there, Caroline, sitting in the restaurant, was worried about Nuri because she had stayed at Joe's house the previous night without telling either of her mothers. Meanwhile, Jim asks people to join his team to search for Paul. He also asks Barbie to go with them because he had proven to be a good leader in putting out the fire. After this, they head into the woods. On the way, Barbie, showing off his skills, tells them that he had also been in the military. Meanwhile, on the other side, Julia sees Junior heading towards the tunnel. She stops him and asks where he is going with a backpack, but Junior was in a big hurry and was also nervous. He says that, "I'm just going to meet my friend nearby." This increases Julia's suspicion of him even more, and she follows him and reaches the tunnel. Over there, at Joe's house, Joe and Nuri were having breakfast together. Joe had never been alone with a girl before, so he was feeling a little nervous, while Nuri was confident and quick-witted in conversation. Right then, Ben arrives at his house with two girls who needed to charge their phones. To impress them, Ben had to use the generator, for which Joe gives permission a little reluctantly, because, in town, the generator was a very useful thing, and misusing it like this didn't seem right to him. Meanwhile, in the woods, we see that the search team finds Paul, but this time, Paul shoots a guy in the leg. Another guy also stays back there to take care of him, while Jim and Barbie run after Paul. On the other side, Junior reaches the far end of the tunnel, where he finds out that the dome has covered the tunnel as well. He gets very close to the wall, which causes his flashlight to start burning. Right then, Julia arrives there and turns him on. Seeing Julia, Junior gets very angry because she was following him. Because of this, Junior, like a madman, starts punching that invisible wall, which Julia stops him from doing. Then the two sit down and start talking. Julia tells him that because of a mistake made in her past, she is stuck in this useless job of a journalist. Over there, Joe's house gets filled with people who had come to use his generator for their own needs. A bully guy tries to collect money from people in exchange for using the generator, which wasn't even his, but no one had the courage to speak against him. Seeing this, Nuri steps forward to handle everything, but the situation gets even more heated. But before anything wrong could happen, the lights go out. Nuri is very happy about the fact that Joe supported her in that argument. Meanwhile, in the woods, Barbie and Jim reach Paul, but Paul had taken out his rifle, with which he was about to kill Jim when, right then, Linda arrives from behind and shoots him. On the other side, Caroline goes to Joe's house and meets her daughter, Nuri. She tells her that she should be a little more responsible. Hearing her scolding, Joe and Nuri hold each other's hands, which causes a static shock, and at this moment, both of them start having seizures. They both together are talking about some pink star. Over there, Junior goes to Angie in the shelter, but this time he had a first aid kit in his hand. Angie bandages his wounds and secretly keeps the scissors with her. Meanwhile, we see that Julia and Barbie, after a day of tiredness, return home, but Julia had started suspecting Barbie after hearing Junior's words, and when Barbie goes to take a shower, Julia starts checking his belongings. So here we came to the end of the part 1. If you enjoyed this crazy ride, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. I want to know which moment freaked you out the most.